All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, members of the General Assembly, members of the public. Thank you for being here today, and welcome to the House Select Committee on Disaster Relief. Today should be an interesting meeting. The goal would be to hold the committee within a timely fashion, so we can get on to other business of the day. So I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to be here. I also want to thank the folks from different parts of the state that traveled here that has an interest in this. First of all, I'd like to start off by thanking members of the staff that are here that have been working on this, and look forward to working with you in the committee through the process. I also like to thank our Sergeant at Arms, Bill Moore, David Lithicum, Bill Riley, and Bear Moore that are here today. Thank you all for your service and what you're doing. We'll go ahead and get right into what we're going to be doing. I would ask that staff, could you read the committee charge so that way everybody has a clear understanding of exactly what we'll be doing today and throughout the course of this committee. The goal would be of this committee is to actually start the process today. As you see on the agenda, we have Director Sprayberry here. He'll be giving us a presentation. What I would like to do over the next couple months during the committee would be to also bring in the different departments and look at what has been done there. Also to possibly do some site visits to some of the areas that are still under distress and the efforts that are continuously going on there. And then hopefully by the end of this committee, we'll come back and talk about preparation in the future and what we do to mitigate flood and disaster responses and issues across our state. And hopefully we'll be able to make a recommendation to the legislative study committee to make recommendations for the short session come up in May 2018. So that will be the goal of the committee, but that depends on the members and the interest in the members want to go in and direction they want to go in. So I look forward to having your input today. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The committee is charged with studying hurricane recovery and flood preparedness, and as part of that, they are authorized to receive updates and provide oversight regarding implementation of the Disaster Recovery Acts of 2016 and 2017, to study the interaction of the state system of rivers, dams, levees, reservoirs, and stormwater infrastructure and the system's impact on flood-prone areas, to review the role and regulatory authority of federal agencies as it relates to implementation of flood prevention and mitigation strategies, to study and develop a proposed recommendation for preventing, mitigating, and remediating the effects of flooding in the low-lying areas of eastern North Carolina, and any other issue that the committee deems relevant.
Thank you very much. Just a refresher for the members and also the public. If you remember, you went back to 2016 after Hurricane Matthew and the forest fires devastated the state of North Carolina. The General Assembly came in 2016 in December in a special session, allocated a $200 million initial disaster relief package. That was then followed up in the 2017 session after the state budget of another $100 million package. And so that's where we'll start with that. We just wanted to put that in the back of your memory so as we're going forward, you'll understand the response the state has done itself. With that said, the committee welcomes Director Sprayberry. Director Sprayberry has been an instrumental part in the disaster relief since the beginning of the storm, during the storm, and after the storm. And Director Sprayberry, welcome to the committee, and look forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you very much, sir. The floor
yes, sir. Thank you. My name is Mike Sprayberry. I'm the Director of Emergency Management. Thank you, Chairman Bell, Vice Chair Jones, and distinguished members of the committee and folks out there in the gallery. It's my honor today to appear before this committee. I just want to tell you that I think that the mission of the committee is a great mission. The number one risk in North Carolina, the number one hazard is flooding. And so anything that we can do to mitigate floods and to study how we are flooded and to take those actions to where we can stop the flooding that's what we're all about, sir. So just there you are. Just wanted to make sure. I've got a lot to talk about today, and I've been told to speak for 30 minutes so that I can have 30 minutes for questions. There's a ton of information, though. So last year, on September the 2nd and 3rd, Tropical Storm Hermine hit North Carolina. Not a whole lot of damages, about 30,000 power outages. We did get a fairly significant amount of rain. Then we got hit by Tropical Storm Julia on September the 22nd in northeastern North Carolina, 10 to 17 inches of rain and really hit the Bertie County and the town of Windsor pretty hard, as well as some other small communities up there in the Northeast. So we did coordinate swiftwater rescue and activated the EOC actually for both of these. During this time frame, we also had some riots in Charlotte. The Colonial Pipeline failed a couple of times, so it was a pretty busy time for us. As you know, on October 8th, Hurricane Matthew struck North Carolina. Didn't actually have landfall here. That was in South Carolina. But what happened was there was rainfall of record in a swath from around Robeson County on upwards northeast towards Bertie County again. Incredible amounts of rain, and areas that had just sustained about 10 inches of rain the weekend before, so the ground was saturated, the water had nowhere to go, and y'all will remember the significant flooding that we experienced. Some of the places that had flooding had never experienced flooding of that magnitude before. Places like Lumberton and Fayetteville and other municipalities. We rescued over 2,300 people with a variety of methodologies, but primarily our state swiftwater rescue teams. We had 77 boat teams with 400 personnel. We used 12 helicopters and a new strategy that we had. It had a helicopter sitting way up high, basically telling all the other helicopters and the boats where to go. Worked really well for us. We actually received the International Higgins and Langley Award for our response for those efforts, and we don't want to have to do that a lot, but if we have to do it, it's good to know that we have a good, well-trained team, and so that's one of the first things that we did on the response. We also had Highway Patrol helping us, North Carolina National Guard, over 1,300 soldiers and airmen. Strike teams with ambulances and paramedics. We also delivered a lot of commodities. And what we were delivering, our commodities were from our two warehouses, one located in Tarboro, one located in Baden, North Carolina. We also had an incident support base at Fort Bragg, to where I call it Red Ball Express, where you could just take tractor trailers that was full of food and water and tarps and cleanup kits, sandbags, and send them out on the field where folks needed it, and it worked really well for us. We also activated a fuel contract to make sure that all of our responders had fuel at all times, and we had significant feeding operations. I want to tell you something. No disaster event can successfully be responded to or recovered from without your volunteers. Our volunteers in this state are the best in the nation, therefore they got to be the best in the world, because the United States of America is the best nation. Everybody knows that. And so we have the Salvation Army, the American Red Cross, and North Carolina Baptist Men that connect together to provide feeding, and that what a wonderful, wonderful job that they did. We really don't need to take them for granted. If you see them, please thank them. They did a great job. We also support feeding operations ourselves, but it's our volunteers that really make the difference. And then you have things like the other things of miscellaneous support that you got to have, like forklifts, porta potties, water pumps, big deal for folks, shower and laundry units, generators. Whole lot of this equipment we purchased with Homeland Security dollars over the years. And so I think that our strategy of purchasing equipment that can be shared and that is mobile really proved itself out during this response to Hurricane Matthew. So really proud of it. It's been a national model, been studied by a lot of people, so really proud of what we're doing, but we know that you got to stay on your A game at all times. No need to get complacent. Right after, well, we were still recovering from Hurricane Matthew, we had 26 major wildfires break out. Not all at one time, but at various times in the western part of our state. And so I would tell you that fire department after fire department all over our great state stepped up to the plate and sent fire apparatus to our western counties. Just an incredible amount of folks. And not only that, we had a lot of folks from out of state too. So they were able to basically get into the fight and ensure that these fires did not get into our structures, businesses and homes. And I think we only lost 2 structures, and they were like storage sheds. And I mean, that's pretty incredible when you look at the urban interface with our forest and where, you know, our exploding growth, our population growth, and people are just moving out into the, you know, closer to the wildlife. And I will tell you that we're so blessed and fortunate that we didn't experience something like what was happening in Gatlinburg. We did not experience that level of winds. Those were hurricane force winds that hit Gatlinburg. We didn't have that. So that provides you with the context of why the Disaster Recovery Acts of 2016 and 2017 were passed. So right after Matthew, the Disaster Recovery Act of 2016 was passed, and it basically provided us with roughly $201 million for various types of disaster assistance and relief purposes. And then in the next session, in 2017, the Disaster Recovery Act of 2017 was passed, and we got another $100 million. And when I say we, I'm using the all-encompassing we. I'm not speaking at this point as the Director of Emergency Management, but as the State Emergency Response Team leader, where I have oversight on all of the different state agencies during a state of emergency. Now, how we're executing it now, each of the state agencies has the responsibility to spend that money efficiently and to eligible purposes. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I will address how other agencies are spending their money as well. I probably won't be able to go into a deeper dive as to what they're doing as I am with my own agency. But let me start, first of all, with the Housing Finance Agency. In 2016, the DRA 16, they received $20 million. And primarily these are for eligible projects for rehab and houses. And folks, they have a partnership. The Housing Finance Agency has a partnership with all these different counties that got hit by Matthew. And with those partnerships, people can make application to get funding to rehab their houses. And so currently, they have spent about $8.5 million. They've got $11.3 million remaining in the kitty. So they think that they're going to be able to keep spending that money on down efficiently. Next is the North Carolina Emergency Management. We were allocated $9 million in DRA 16 for housing, and I will tell you that that money really helped us out, because what we found, and let me just back up for a second here. One thing that I learned very quickly is that when you receive money from the legislature, that's a good thing to do good things with, and I understand that. But one of the things that I had to learn about was how to basically stand up a program from scratch so that it met the test where it was eligible and auditable and efficient, and it was reaching the people that it needed to reach. And also we're trying to do what we call in emergency management, speed to the need. And so don't ever want to spend money, frivolously. We want to make sure it's spent responsibly. So I learned a lot about trying to quickly stand up programs that would help people. And an example of one of these is the Disaster Rental Assistance Program. And we got to have an acronym for it. We call it DRAP. And so what happened is we were having folks in households that were staying in what we call the Transitional Sheltering Assistance Program, which meant that they were living in hotels, which the federal government and the state paid for. Now, I'm not talking luxury hotels either. I'm talking these hotels are not necessarily the hotels that you would choose if you were going somewhere, but you had families in these hotels. And not only that, they were there for some length of time because of the lack of affordable housing. So what we had to do is we had to figure out a way, because some of these people, their income level, I mean, they just didn't have a whole lot of money to put down a deposit on a rental property to really get back going with their lives. And so what we did is we developed this disaster rental assistance program, which we would allocate an amount of $50,000 to the social service of each one of these counties, and then they would check to make sure that these people were eligible, that they hadn't received duplicate benefits or anything like that, and they would provide a deposit, maybe a couple months' rent, and some utility money to get started and to get people becoming a productive citizen in life again, so that we could get them out of the hotel, get people back into some sense of normalcy with their children. Because if you can imagine being stuck in a hotel room, even if it was a luxury hotel room with your kids for weeks upon end, that's not good for anybody. So we stood up that program. It's worked a charm, and basically we pretty much have finished that one out. We also have housing counselors that we contracted through the North Carolina Housing Coalition. They've been doing a great job. We're continuing to use them to help people find housing that's affordable, that meets their income level, and they're working like that. We have a contract with the North Carolina Community Development Initiative, and for instance, we worked with them, and they reached out to get a private sector partner to connect and to rehab 81 units that are in Lumberton. And we put in just a small amount of money, and they were able to leverage our money with the private sector money and to get 81 units rehabbed, and we already have people back into it. And these are primarily elderly and disabled and those with a lower socioeconomic, lower income. And so, big win for us. We've also got 150 units that we're working on in places like Lumberton, Tarboro, and Fayetteville, same kind of thing. We're also working with them to create a land bank in the area of Rocky Mount, and we've also are in discussions with the Development Finance Institute out of the School of Government at Chapel Hill to do some of the same things to increase the portfolio of affordable housing, which after Hurricane Matthew has become my number one priority. I just have to say it. There's not a lot out there. And for me, and as an emergency manager, if there's not a lot of affordable housing, then that means people are in shelters. And so I need to have more of that. And so that's what I'm working hard on. And I would also tell you that this is not something that I'm used to working with, affordable housing. And so, but I'm learning quick. All right. In 2017, we got $20 million also to be used for a variety of reasons, for repair of owner-occupied, low to moderate income housing that wasn't covered by the Community Development Block Grants for Disaster Recovery, CDBG-DR. Took me a long time to say that. Repair of low to moderate income rental housing, housing elevation, y'all know about that, the hazard mitigation, the state acquisition relocation funds, which have been a tried and true methodology over the years back to Floyd days, to where if the pre-disaster value of a house, when you buy somebody out, and the pre-disaster value is not going to give them enough money to get into another affordable piece of affordable housing, then we can give them a little bit of money out of this state acquisition and relocation fund, the SARF. Flood insurance subsidies and other things. And so what we decided with this to do, and what we have done, is we have built a CDBG-DR-like program with DRA 17 funding. These are for counties that were not described in the Federal Register as being the most distressed or most impacted. So what we did is we decided, okay, we're going to give them a chop on this money so that they can do some housing rehabs themselves. And so we've already encumbered $8.2 million in awards, and the award letters have been delivered, and we believe that they'll be spending money pretty soon as the MOAs are completed. We've got $3.78 million for hazard mitigation, $3.78 for the SARF program. We're going to use $435,000 for acquisition of new land for Princeville for resilient redevelopment. And I can tell you that we were in touch with the town lawyer of Princeville today. I signed the paperwork last week to purchase that land, and so it looks like that's going to be done in the next few days so that we'll be able to move forward on that. We also have $1.5 million for funding for volunteer organizations active during disasters, and we've already sent out awards for $450,000. And then we were given the permission to hire community development specialists to work in these counties to help them with their grants, and so we've already hired them too. $5 million has been granted to Lumber River Council of Government for affordable housing to manage that in the town of Fairbluff. And if any of y'all know about Fairbluff, they got hit really hard. Golden Leaf. I think Golden Leaf is a great story. Basically, I think around $55 million that was allocated through DRA 16 and 17. I can stand here before you today and tell you that all of the funding that they were allocated in DRA 16 has been awarded, and after their meeting on December the 7th, their next board meeting, all of their money for DRA 17 will be awarded. I think that's pretty strong. That's a very nimble and agile program. It does a lot of good for local jurisdictions. So that's a good story right there. The Department of Commerce and Rural Economic Development Division, Commerce has already awarded 15 grants totaling $7.4 million. They have $2.5 million remaining, and it's for the development of new residential structures outside the 100-year floodplain. So they're moving along smartly as well. Another agency that's moving along pretty well is DEQ, and so they're working on those ever-important wastewater and drinking water systems, dam safety, emergency permitting. You can see there on your paperwork they've made a lot of awards to include the mitigation of burial sites, and so these awards have been moving out, like I said, very quickly. They had $10 million. They've got $3 million left. And so one thing I'd like to make a note of right here is that I think it's a good example of state government working together. We have what we call the unmet needs meeting, and we meet generally a couple of times a month, and it includes Golden Leaf, emergency management, DEQ, commerce, agriculture, and we'll get together, and everybody that's out there working in the counties and municipalities, and they're seeing what's going right and what's going wrong, and they find out what's falling through the gaps, and we'll get together, and based upon each little bucket of money that we have, we will work together as professionals, as colleagues, to try to address those unmet needs. I just think that's good business. And also, what we do, y'all don't laugh at me, but we call it the hot spot strike team. So you will determine a hot spot, like Lumberton, like Fairbluff, Princeville, Windsor, whatever. And so instead of just having one person representing DEQ to go out there and interview the local officials and the folks out there, we will get everybody, to include FEMA, Golden Leaf, Emergency Management, DEQ, Commerce, and put them all together so you can basically have a meeting with everyone, and that way the local folks, they only have to meet one time and they get all their questions answered at once, and that's what we want to do for good customer service. And so as you may know, our motto in emergency management is to ask yourself, what have you done for the counties today? We're not perfect, but we try. And so, and I want to also thank our partners that help us as well. They do a great job. Again, Economic stabilization, Golden Leaf, $5 million in 16, all awarded. Great job there. Department of Commerce with Economic Development Partnership. That was done for a survey on the need for business assistance funds for businesses affected by Matthew. And Commerce did such a good job with their survey as they've only spent a little bit of money. They've got $235,000 left, but there's really no legal way that they can spend that money on anything else right now. So what we need to do is to figure out, moving forward with y'all's help, maybe what we can do with that $235,000, because I can tell you this, every penny counts in the Hurricane Matthew disaster. We're still short some funding. We had 3,000 people apply for buyouts, elevations, and demolition rebuilds of their homes. We only have enough funding for about 800, which leaves about 2,200 houses left. That these are households that want it. They've asked for it. They're eligible. And that's going to take, for that gap, would take around $300 million. So there's still some gaps out there. And as I'm talking about that, I'd mentioned that even though we got slammed hard by Hurricane Matthew, if we hadn't taken the mitigation measures that we did during Hurricane Floyd, we would be hurting a lot worse, because after Floyd, we bought out hundreds of homes and got them out of the floodplain. And I think that speaks to what you were talking about, Representative Bell, mitigating and let's finding a way to manage our rivers and our communities to make them more resilient. Agriculture got $37.9 million in 16. They are working. Some of that is for wildfire, timber restoration, the wildfire response, like I said, Claridge Nursery, research stations, and I can tell you they've out of the $25 million they've got for repairs and operational experiences to the nursery, they've got about I think they've spent $10 million. They've spent just about all their money for soil and water conservation, for stream debris removal and non-field farm road repairs. And if I may, after Hurricane Matthew, I went out with the governor. I also went out with the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. And if there was one thing that everybody talked about everywhere we went, no matter their station in life, it was the poor drainage of our rivers and streams and ditches in eastern North Carolina. A lot of reasons for that. I won't go into them here unless you ask me, but I will tell you this is a very popular program. They got allocated some more money for DRA 17, and they get bids. They receive applications rather for assistance on that, and my guess is they'll be executing that funding very smartly as well. So I'm moving into DRA 17 with ag. They got $20 million for soil and water conservation, for stream debris. They're just in the start. They had to get rid of 16 first, so I'm sure the commissioner and his team will be rolling through that very quickly. Next, for recovery planning, North Carolina Emergency Management received $11.5 million to do resilient redevelopment plans for 49 counties that received a federal disaster declaration. There was a 50th that was added later on, and I made the command decision to go ahead and include the 50th. So we did 50 county-approved resilient redevelopment plans. And I got to say that many of the counties, when we contacted them and said that we are here to help you write a plan, and we need to have some public meetings, they were less than enthusiastic, as I would have been, especially just going through a major disaster. But I think when they saw what it was going to do, it ended up being one of the best things we've ever done, because each of the plan actually has like 15 to 20 mitigation strategies, things that each county want to do that will help their county become more resilient after this event. And so we're extremely pleased with it. And what I've done is I've made those my staff that works out in the field, they have a copy of that now so that they can track and make sure that it's not something that just goes on a shelf to be forgotten forever. So some of the other projects that we've done is we did a Princeville site plan, engineering and architectural study of existing buildings in Princeville, an in-depth study of Robeson County public school buildings, and planning studies for small communities. And what we did with that is the Hurricane Matthew Disaster Response Recovery and Resiliency Initiative that I asked for from UNC Chapel Hill, led by Dr. Gavin Smith, and they go to the towns of Windsor, Seven Springs, Lumberton, Princeville, Fair Bluff, and then there's one other, and it escapes me, but maybe Kinston. But anyway, we want to go out there to make sure that we're working with them and that they're getting the support that they need, because many of them are impacted again and again. Also, we are considering an analysis of the public housing damage in Lumberton. The volunteer fire department infrastructure is still being worked on with the Office of State Fire Marshal. They're looking at that right now. They haven't spent any money yet. Community colleges, that was to offset losses that they had for the enrollment declines during Hurricane Matthew. They were allocated $2.7 million. They have $400,000 remaining. The emergency response and disaster relief. As y'all know, North Carolina, instead of passing through the match cost for disaster grants and public assistance to the county level, the state assumes that 25% match. So 75% of if you have a water or wastewater plant that's damaged, and the cost, the federal government, if it's eligible, will pick up 75% of that cost. The state picks up the 25%. And so we were allocated $66.2 million in 2016 and $22 million in 2017 to ensure that we had enough match money on hand as we move forward to complete these many projects, of which there's about 2,000 projects, $400 million in public assistance, and I'm pleased to tell you here that we're about 89% obligated, which is extraordinary, only a little bit over a year after, and primarily the projects that are outstanding are roads, bridges, and culverts, which take a long time to execute. So I would tell you that I'm very happy with my team and with the FEMA team. It's been great. We've done really well at hazard mitigation. We got our projects in before any of the other states and they got hit by Hurricane Matthew, and we had a lot more, so that's good. So that means we'll get our projects back quicker. And so we look to get those towards the end of February, beginning of March, so we can start doing the buyouts. And I will tell you also that since emergency management has an enhanced mitigation plan status, we received an additional $27 million more because we had a better plan. That's just great. That's money in the pocket. And so that means more homes elevated, more homes bought out. And so there's also $10 million in DRA 16 to replenish funds for future disasters. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to our partners at OSBM. They give us great support as we move that money out, and so we always know that we're in a stable fiscal situation. And sir, that completes my report. Subject to your questions.
Thank you, Director Sprayberry. There's a number of questions. I saw some hands. They're making eye contact. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Bill. I have two questions. One, I want to also make a comment. I want to congratulate you on the hard work done. Having worked in some of the great places of the world. Oh, I'm sorry. That's indeed. I want to congratulate you on the work that you've done, having worked in some of the places in the world where disasters have occurred. It is a total uphill battle, and I congratulate you on it. I have two questions, and this is really more, the first one is a logistics question. When we have such a disaster, such as Matthew occurred, and you have the Baptist men that come in and want to do work, are all these different groups, do they call on you and say, where do you need us? How does all that work? Because they don't pick a site by themselves to show up, or I just really kind of want to how you handle that logistically.
Yes, sir. So we have a quarterly meeting with our volunteer organizations active during disasters, of which the Baptist Men, Red Cross, all those folks are part of it. And then we have a monthly telephone call with them as well. And so what we have done is we have mapped out the entire state, and we have determined where are the best locations for feeding operations. And as you might imagine, a lot of them are at a big Baptist church somewhere. And but you got to look at the infrastructure. Does it have enough water? Is there places for people at the park? Can you set up their big kitchen there? And so we, do that, and it's already pre-designated positions. We also have a plan to where the American Red Cross uses a purchase order system to buy food for the Baptist men to prepare, and then the American Red Cross uses an emergency response vehicle to go out on pre-designated routes that we can look on, and they go out and they provide food, and then wherever there's gaps, our Salvation Army partners, they go out there with their canteens and cook on spot. So it's, now that all, me standing here nice and clean on a nice day, it all sounds like, wow, that's going to happen like that every time. It's disasters and sometimes things happen, but it's pretty smooth operation. And what we do is they come and they brief me and they tell me, how many meals they can feed. And I've got my operations chief and my logistics chief with me, and we make decisions on where we think we want these kitchens to be based on the track of the storm or wherever event was happening. And it actually works out pretty good for us. And I will tell you that in a lot of other states, people don't check their egos at the door. And so that's what we say. When you come to the EOC, you got to check your ego at the door, because we're all working together for the common objective. So we work together, we have battle drills, and we just do all that together.
Follow up? All right. Thank you for that response. That helps, put a thought train to that, because it just doesn't happen overnight.
No, sir.
Specifically, when we're having to deal with locations like Princeville, that are low-lying areas that are obviously recurring risks for flooding, something has to be done futuristic. We have to prevent these things from occurring again. Our folks in the North Sea, up in the northern part of Europe, in Holland, they've been dealing with this for 400, 600 years, and they live under sea level. How are we going to put together a plan for North Carolina as sea level changes occur, as more disasters occur, to use the knowledge that has been used worldwide to help put it in North Carolina and prevent things like Princeville becoming flooded over and over and over again?
Right. So what we're doing in Princeville right now, we agree with you. And so the parcel of land that we purchased is out of that flood area, and so it's at a higher elevation, and we don't think that it's going to flood like the rest of the town does. The town will have to annex it, and it'll be a different look for Princeville. But bottom line is, like you say, repetitive flooding, you just can't keep pouring money into it. FEMA won't do it. State won't do it. So what do we do? So I think one of the big things, and one of the things that the governor wants us to do, is he would like to have a study of all the rivers done so that we can basically begin crafting a strategy on how to mitigate our flooding issues, the Neuse, the Tar, the Cape Fear, all of them. It's got to be comprehensive because they're kind of all connected. And and we have folks here from Kinston today, and so they know, they keep seeing it over and over again. So what are we going to do about it? And that's one of the governor's, he's told us about that, and he wants that to happen. So we would welcome. The problem is funding, right? You got to have some funding for that, and we've been scrapping together bits here and there, but it really needs to be overarching and comprehensive and basically grounded in science. And so I'm excited to be a part of that. Our floodplain mapping and flood management is located in emergency management. That's how come we were able to send information about where flooding was going to happen, when, and all that kind of stuff. But what we would like to see is a responsible, way moving forward. How do we develop housing, businesses, roads, the whole gamut. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much, Mr. Sprayberry. It's amazing what you have done since you've been here. I've been very, very pleased with you, and you've been very responsive to all of us who have asked about the flood insurance and all, and I appreciate that. I have a couple of questions. The first one is, compared to Floyd, how many dollars have come in from the feds, and how many dollars is the state putting in compared to Floyd? I just wondered if they were similar or...
So I think, without having the data in front of me, I'm not going to hazard a guess. I know that, it's an estimated $4.8 billion worth of damages for this disaster. I know that I can honestly tell you that we are $400 million for public assistance, of which 75% of that is federal. Individual assistance is roughly $100 million. Hazard mitigation, about $111 million. The NFIP program, $200 million. Small Business Administration, $100 million. So what I can do is I can take that question back and do a comparison and see what I can come up with. But we know that we received more rain, more water during Matthew than we did in Floyd.
Okay.
But due to the mitigation activities, there was a huge cost avoidance for Matthew, and that was a lesson learned from Floyd. And we also had some other challenges, like during Floyd we were allowed to use travel trailers. Well, they told us we couldn't use travel trailers. Guess what they're using in Texas now? Travel trailers. And so, but anyway, ma'am, I will get an answer for you on that.
Follow up, just one more question. When you do a buyout in these flooded areas, especially the ones that have flooded in Floyd and Matthew, is there, when you take those houses down, is there any tree planting? Because every tree soaks up so much water, and I think that, that is a mitigation, a preventative kind of thing. Maybe work with the forestry division to go in there and plant those areas.
Yes, ma'am, and they want to have a green space there, and I think that would be a wonderful idea. We would just have to work with the community to make that happen. But once there's a buyout, you can't use this green space in perpetuity, right? And so you've taken it away, and it's supposed to remain there just like that. So I think that would be an excellent idea to encourage tree planting by our communities and jurisdictions.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, thank you again. You and I have had several conversations. I appreciate everything you have done for us. And one skill that I always like to brag on is I listen for every time you say there's money available. And I heard you say on these funds allocated with the EDP of NC, the DRA 16, there's about $235,000 left. Now, who can we talk to, you or Commerce, about allocation of those funds?
That would be Commerce, sir. And so, we just need to find a way to where we can unlock the key so that they can be used for some other purpose, because it's been used for what it was stipulated for in the law.
All right. Follow up. One last one, sir. The $347,472 for the community colleges, if that has been used and that's what's left, can they reapply for that money or send an additional request into for that?
Sir, I do not know, but I will follow up on that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Just while you're standing there, Director, is there anybody from the community college system that happen to be here that may want to answer that? If you would just state your name and.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Mercy Benton. I'm with the Office of State Budget Management, and I prepare the report monthly that gets submitted to the General Assembly. The $2.7 million was allocated. They have encumbered all of those dollars. $347 is what has actually been expended, and the rest of it has been encumbered.
Okay.
You may want to stay right there while we got you here. Sometimes you speak up and you answer a question, you get a whole bunch more. So, any other questions?
Yeah, follow. So the monies have been used. There's no further funds, correct?
Yes, sir. Those monies have been encumbered. It's just a matter now of them being sent, the dollars being sent down to the community colleges.
Thank you. We're just always looking for more.
Yes, sir.
While I've got you up there, I'll ask a brief question. With the money from Commerce, that is the 200, and what we Representative Jones said, 230,000+. Is there anything from the state budget office that they can let us know as far as what the differentiators are between allocation of that funding and the disaster relief law, so we maybe can go back and look and see what we can do to reallocate those funds in the 2018 short session?
Again, Mercy Benton, Office of State Budget and Management. Is my understanding, sir, that we do not have the authority under the existing law to reallocate those funds for any other purpose. They've completed what they were intended to utilize those funds for, so it's my understanding that it would require an act of this body to allow those funds to be used for another purpose.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Representative Fairclough.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Sprayberry, thank you again. Every time we call on you, you come in with wonderful information and help us do our job. And thank you so much for everything that your folks do. A couple of questions. I have a very poor understanding of engineering. I admire engineers, and but I do quite a bit of real estate, and I've noticed many times. This is probably in the more populated areas than down east, but oftentimes a new subdivision will go in, and where there was a pasture or where there was a forest or something, now suddenly there are all these rooftops which shed water. There are all these sidewalks and all this pavement that goes in. Literally everything is covered with concrete, and that water has to go somewhere. And it would seem to me that would have a great effect on what we call the 100-year floodplain. How accurate is that 100-year floodplain, and what can you give us just a layman's understanding of how that works, how repeatedly that's
Yes, sir.
studied?
And so it is fairly accurate, and it's becoming more accurate as the years go by. I mean, they have many different points now where that they use. We use aircraft to gather points from the earth, and so it's amazing how much more accurate it is now than it used to be. And so what's happened now, we have found, and Representative McElrath knows this well, is that it's becoming so accurate that some places that were in the floodplain are now out of the floodplain, while some places that were not in it are now in it. And it really creates an issue for us trying to explain that. And so, and I'm not the right person to explain all the engineering that goes behind it, but you're right. The development affects, the floodplain. And so, but it's my understanding that the engineers that are looking at that in the National Flood Insurance Program take that into effect, and so into account rather. And but I will have to get you to, if you want a more granular answer on that, I'll have to get one of my experts to get one for you. And so, if I can say the question back to you, how does all the development affect the 100-year floodplain? Is that pretty much what you're asking, sir?
Follow up. Yes, sir. And I would also include in that we build an awful lot of superhighways nowadays, and every square foot of concrete is another place that water can't go. So if you can put a little basic information together and sort of cover the construction like superhighways and large commercial buildings and so forth, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Willingham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too want to thank Mr. Spracefield for Sprayberry. How about that?
Representative Willingham, if you just hold for 1 second. Students, thank y'all for coming today. I'm glad you got to see your government in action, and we'd love for you to come back to future committees, not just this one, but others that are going throughout the interim. So thank y'all for being here, and thank you for conducting yourselves in a proper manner. Thank you very much. That was worth noting. So, Representative Willingham, I apologize. The floor is yours.
That's okay. I call him Sprayfield because I'm thinking of my question has something to do with landfill. I have been dealing with this since the disaster, and as a matter of fact, even today, I just met with some people before I came up here in regards to what's happening, especially in Princeville. My question, I got a couple, but my first question is dealing with mitigation, especially over in the Princeville area. What has been the involvement of the citizens in their selection or being given the right to make a selection when it comes to mitigation as it relates to the Princeville area right now? There, as you're probably aware that there's some controversy right now involving that. So could you tell me what was the involvement of the citizens, or if there is an involvement, and what the town council, what their involvement and what they are doing, is that in compliance with what the state suggested when you went through the process of buying the land and also giving them the permission to have mitigation in that area?
Right. And so I would tell you, sir, that the town council, we have been to numerous public meetings of the town council, and the public has been afforded the opportunity to have their voices heard to the town council. So we have not been trying. So first of all, what has to happen for hazard mitigation is that, the town council has to approve it. And so, because they didn't do that after Floyd, they didn't approve buyouts, right? And so, even though there were a lot of people, I understand, that wanted it, they were not granted that by the town council. So this time, the town council voted and passed an ordinance to approve it, but then came back later and said that, well, not for everybody. And, that's a town council decision. I mean, I can't really pass judgment on the town council, but that's what they did. Then, there seemed to be a real desire to perhaps expand the footprint of Princeville, because they knew that the levee was not going to be fixed by the Corps of Engineers, not anytime soon, maybe sometime in the future, because it's about a $27 million process. So there was a desire to expand the footprint of Princeville, which was discussed with everyone. They seem to want it. I think they still do, but they also want to maintain the Senior Citizen Center and the Town Hall for historical purposes, to which that's where some of their money has been put into. And so it's been somewhat interesting as we move forward, but I will tell you that we don't make those decisions without consulting with the mayor, Ms. Joyner, all the rest of them. And so, and as you know, they've got a new town manager now, Greg Bethea. And so we've been working with them. Yes, sir.
I can follow up. I guess my question, too, is that we're only talking about a small number of people when we're talking about mitigation in Princeville. And the council voted to have mitigation and then came back just the last couple of weeks and rescinded that. And I'm wondering if we, meaning the legislature, do we have any leverage or when we gave that money and we approved it for mitigation, to compel the town council to do what they had promised the citizens at that time? And again, like I said, we're talking only maybe 3 or 4 families. And this has become a real hot issue over there. And it's causing a lot of problems. So I'm just wondering, when we approved mitigation, or when mitigation was approved for the area, for the town, was there any stipulations in there once that they had approved it for the town also?
We don't have that authority. That's a local municipal authority. Emergency management doesn't have that authority. I don't know if I guess the General Assembly could weigh in on it, but I don't think that's for me to say.
Okay, all right. That follow up. Let me move away from that. One of my pet issues is mental health, and
yes, sir.
And I understand, of course, the emergency management got some money from the federal government to be used to put counselors or mental health workers in the affected areas. And so I'm wondering, I met with social services and a number of other agencies in the area, and nobody seems to know where those counselors or those mental health workers are. So could you tell me if they have been assigned there, if anybody's there, if I guess it went through mental health, you passed the money to them and they put the mental health workers there. So could you tell me where they are, if there are any?
There are some, and there was a grant provided to the Division of Mental Health, and they don't stay at a certain place. They go out on taskings to meet with people, is what I was, been told.
Well, I guess also, will you be getting any report from mental health as to where these people are and what they're supposed to be doing? Because and the reason I'm saying that is because I've talked to a number of people in the area, and again, social services and mental health, and nobody seems to know if these people are in the area or been in the area. So that's a concern, because during a disaster, of course, there's been the reason there is because of the stress. And I'm still dealing with families who are in distress as a result of this. They've been flooded 2 or 3 times, and they have the stress of dealing with the federal government, the state government, and all the other agencies. And so they need somebody. So is there any way you can find that out?
I can. Yes, sir.
And one other question. With the $27 million, you said that you have left in some fund or pot. I'm not sure which one. You had mentioned that there was $27 million that you had gotten as a result, I guess, of being as efficient as you are in dealing with mitigation. Do you recall in your report?
Right. So, $27 million, and we are efficient. Mm-hmm. So, what's the question, sir?
What are you going to do with the $27 million? Is there some way that people who are still trying to go through, who's been approved for mitigation and who qualify, can any of that money be used to take care of that?
So the way that the law reads is that if it doesn't fit squarely into what it says in the law, we don't have the authority to shift it from one spot to another. Sort of like what I was referring to with the commerce. We got $250,000 to do a survey. There's $235,000 remaining. We don't have the authority to put that somewhere else. It's got to stay in that pot. So there's $26 million remaining in the funding for the match, but it's got to stay in the match because that's what the law prescribes. we do, that's just the way the law is.
Follow up. So I guess my question is, the $27 million here, what part is this in?
So actually, I'm not sure which 27 million. There's many millions here that I'll need to go look at. So let me look right quick. And do you remember which one it was?
No, I just remember the $27 million that you have. That's not incumbent right now.
Actually, yes, sir. Okay.
You don't have to find it right now, but if you would find, what pot is in, because the question I'm asking really is, if it's mitigation, would it have to stay in that mitigation, or is there separate pots of mitigation? Is it mitigation as a whole, or mitigation for a particular area? Or
So the hazard, if we do have hazard mitigation money, it's in DRA 17. And so what it is we've got $3.78 million in hazard mitigation. That's wherever we decide to use it. But my guidance to the team is the worst households have the priority. And so, are you suggesting that I prioritize it somewhere else?
I'm suggesting that there's a possibility that we can cut off whatever is happening in Princeville by providing the mitigation money for these 3 families or 4 families, and that will take care of. They've been approved,
Right.
For mitigation,
Right.
They've been told they can't. They're not selected by the town council.
So they were approved by us. We have the money, but we can't honor it unless the town council approves it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Representative Willingham, I think we have identified something the committee may need to look into. So, Representative White.
Thank you so much for all that you're doing, Director. We appreciate your good report and all that, and we hope that you will convey our appreciation to your team.
Yes, ma'am.
That being said, dotted throughout the report, there's references to debris removal. It's mostly contained within the agricultural infrastructure section. Many of our municipalities are suffering from debris that needs to be removed from their stormwater system. And they just don't have the infrastructure to do it, the money to do it. A lot of it is being caused by our railroad system. And I know that it's hard to mix feds and state, and I understand that the state typically does not have any control necessarily of our railroads. But I wanted to ask you if there is, do you all actually ever meet with the railroad? Do they want to meet with you? Will they refuse to meet with you?
No, we do.
We really, what's happening in many of our municipalities, especially in my area, the railroad ties are thrown off when they're, the railroad really keeps the railroad system. But when the ties are no longer needed, or if they want to replace them, a lot of times they don't remove them and they just run down, they fall down into the culverts, and they get into the stormwater systems. Many of our municipalities are not growing as much as some of the others in our community, and they just don't have the funds to go back to a system that's been there. Their stormwater system is outdated, and they don't have the infrastructure funds to go in and to really find out. They can't unclog one because of the effect that it may have down the line. So there may cause more flooding. Is this a common problem across North Carolina, and is this something that we as a body can have any impact on? Or
This is the first time that I've heard about railroad ties, and but we can certainly check it out. We have good relationships with our railroads, and we have exercises with them because they transport hazardous materials, and And plus, we want to make sure our transportation routes are open at all times for not just transporting people, but also for business. And so we can certainly reach out to them, and we'll get back to you to find out. I'll give you what their thoughts are, and also we can ask our county partners, what do they think about the issues? Are they seeing that statewide or in a region or whatever?
That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Because prevention, all that we're doing is somewhat correcting, and there is some prevention components in here, but I do think that hopefully this committee will be thinking of the word prevention. And some of this is, we've had businesses to lose everything because of this particular issue.
Okay.
After, with Matthew, and then the tropical storm that hit after Matthew. So it's a big issue in our community.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
you.
Are there any other questions for Director Sprayberry? Director Sprayberry, thank you for everything. I publicly have thanked you before, and I'm going to do it again. Appreciate the work and energy and effort you and your staff put in, not during the storm, but after the storm, and continue to today. So thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated.
Members of the committee, now is the time I actually would like to hear from you. We have a I wouldn't say a broad scope, but a fairly broad scope to be able to look at this further, look at the state response, look at further response, look at any issues. Actually, some of the issues have been brought up here today that we may need to look at, but I wanted to hear any recommendations from any members of the committee on what we need to look at moving forward, and we'll incorporate that in the agenda. Representative McElrath.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, I just wanted to kind of comment on the sea level rise thing. I don't think the sea level rise is the issue with these rivers. I think it's the debris removal and some other things we can do. Because we're not flooding at the coast like, Matthew and Floyd did not flood our area at all. We had no issues. Sometimes we have a little beach erosion, but those two we had none. So flooding has been more inland and, around the rivers. So I think that we really need to look at our rivers as far as the flooding goes. So I just wanted to make that statement.
I want us to check on the railroad ties.
And I take it, Representative Willingham, you'd like for us to look into the mental health situation and probably to discuss the principal situation offline and see if we can find a resolution there. Okay. Any other members of the committee? Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those of you who live in areas that were not as devastated as myself and Representative Bell, I would like to make a recommendation that we probably have an off-site committee to go to some of these devastated areas so you can see firsthand exactly what we're dealing with. So I would like to put that in the record that we can look into that, Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Jones. What I would probably do is instead of trying to move a full committee down there, these good folks behind me and the staff, everything is it's a pretty big task. What we may do is just do a visit instead of having a fully committee meeting. Just invite members of the committee and also staff if they would like to attend a visit. Then we do a visit, and I would recommend that we go to more than one area to actually see what's going on. So, any other recommendations for the committee? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.